Hello, Toejam Earl. I want to play a game.
And that game was released in 2009 for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 and Windows PC. And if you're a fan of the movies, then I would say that this is indeed a must-play. The sequel, not so much, but more on that in a little bit. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, because today we are digging into everything related to Saw. Starting with the movies and how they came to be before moving into the world of, well, everything else, from board games, merch, roller coaster rides, and some of the most obsessive fans since the Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger days of horror that are, I gotta be honest, incredibly scary themselves. And then of course we'll be looking into the video games too, in Saw, the history and the games. Welcome to Slug's Game Room. But first, a quick word from this video sponsor, Factor 75. Like me, you probably make your worst dietary decisions when you have no time to prepare your food. A quick rummage around in the cupboards or a pop in at the corner shop results in you creating something that's not only unhealthy, but a tad boring too. Well, thankfully, Factor 75 fixes both of these issues by providing incredibly tasty and healthy meals right on your doorstep. No mess, no fuss, no prep. Factor cuts out stressful meal planning and allows you to make these cooked to perfection meals within minutes. And if you're watching this video, then you can get yourself 50% off your first Factor 75 box plus free wellness shots for life. That's 2 free wellness shots per order with an active subscription. Just go slap the code POGSLOPESJAN50 to take full advantage of this offer. Factor even offers meals for those looking to follow keto, low-calorie or vegan and vegetarian lifestyles. So if you want to start 2024 off the healthy and delicious way, then again be sure to use code POGSLOPESJAN50 to get yourself 50% off your first box, plus those 2 free wellness shots for life. Thanks to Factor 75 for sponsoring this video, links are all down below, but for now, let's carry on with the video. And what better place to start off than the early 2000s, where James Wan, a struggling writer and director who hadn't done much besides a few short clay animations and short movies, including the oh-so-terrible He Refuses to Release It Stygian movie. Whilst at film school, he met Leigh Whannell, yet another struggling scriptwriter and actor, and after working on that currently lost forever Stygian movie from the year 2000, they decided to collaborate on an independent horror film that Leigh would script and James would direct, based on an idea that James had. Guys, if you have never seen the first ever Saw movie, stop this video right now and watch it. It has one of the best twist endings, not only in horror, but of all movie history, and I would hate to spoil it for you. This is your last chance.
Make your choice.
And that idea that James had was pretty basic. All he knew was that he wanted a film where 2 guys would be chained in a room with a dead guy in the middle. The film would constantly cut away to a bad guy watching them through CCTV. But at the end of the flick, it's discovered that said bad guy wasn't the ultimate bad guy. He was being forced by the real killer who, you'll never guess it, was the pretending to be dead guy in the middle of the room the whole time. What? As stated, this was easily one of the biggest jaw-dropping moments in all of horror, if not movie history, ever for me. But to get to that point, Leigh needed to take this bare-bones idea away and come up with a story based on who these guys were, why these guys are here, and why did the fake dead guy pretend to be dead all along. And although it did take some time to turn that idea into the first draft of the script, a lot of the ideas that he put into that script were buried in real-world events. You see, for Leigh as a youngster, he dealt with severe headaches, and after going to the doctors to discover why he got them, he laid in his hospital bed and thought to himself, what would happen if I got told I had a tumour? What would I do if I only had 1 year left to live? Which then led to the thoughts of turning that into a horror movie. What if a killer only had 1 year left to live and as a result forced other people who take their life for granted to only have 10 minutes to live? How would they see their lives differently, and how would they act, and what would they do? It was an intriguing idea, and after a grueling 9 months, that first draft was written. But not without James putting in his own inspiration too. Now, James knew what to add into a horror film. Yeah, you got your not so cute iconic clown doll thing, whose name is Billy the Clown in case you were wondering, because as you know, all good horror movies need a scary clown mascot made of paper mache and black ping pong balls created by James himself or something. But what about Jigsaw? Where did his inspiration come from? Well, according to the special features of Saw 2, James said the inspiration came from a story that he had heard of a serial offender that would break into people's houses and tickle their children's feet. Now, I tried very briefly to look up the name of this serial tickler so I could let you all know a name for my Saw history video, but when I searched for this, I realised that there were pages and pages of people that have done this over the years, breaking into people's houses and tickling their feet. It disgusts me so much, so unfortunately I didn't research it any more than that. For me, it's worse than what actually happens in the Saw movies. I hate this. And it turns out that James had the same reaction. For the next several nights, he was so disturbed by this idea that he slept with a hammer next to his bed. And as time moved on, unlike me, he did decide to research this serial tickler some more, and what he discovered was that he wasn't to blame. He was supposedly forced to do this from an unknown third party who would send him instructions on the back of jigsaw puzzle pieces. And yes, this part of the story gets way more disturbing, but more on that in a little bit. But for now, let's get back to that original script. The guys knew they had something special here, and as it got passed around several typical Hollywood proofreaders, the boys continued to storyboard the whole process as they expected to make it on a budget in Australia, which was where they lived. Eventually, one of those Hollywood proofreaders saw the script and the boys were invited to LA to speak with the studio, which was when they decided to film a small scene from the film themselves to show that these Hollywood big suits weren't just getting script writers, they were getting filmmakers too. Saw 0.5 was the end result, a short 9-minute film that was essentially the reverse bear trap scene from the eventual first movie. The plan originally was going to be the flash of the camera in the dark scene, but they rightfully decided that this would be far more impactful. In the short, Lee played the role himself, eventually played by Shawnee Smith, and in case you haven't worked it out yet, yes, Lee, the scriptwriter and star of this short movie, eventually went on to play Adam in the first movie. And it's got to be said, besides the grading and acting, virtually all the elements that make this film so iconic are here in this short, including Billy the Clown.
Hello, David. You don't know me, but I know you. I want to play a game.
As rough as that short first film was, it was instantly greenlit by Jeff Hoffman, and within a week, the duo had everything they needed to create their first quote-unquote big budget film. Cary Elwes was the final piece of the puzzle. He got involved early on in the development process after reading the script and meeting with the duo. Seeing their homemade clown and pictures of what they were going for, Cary was so impressed with their efforts that he signed up to the 2-week shoot pretty quickly. Yep, 2 weeks. It was an incredibly short filming time set aside for the flick, and surprisingly very little got changed when creating the film almost entirely at an old rundown warehouse called Lacey Street Studios, a building used for many films and music video creators, full of empty rooms where they could build rooms inside of said rooms, including the iconic bathroom scene, which obviously means it sadly no longer exists. And yes, the guy in the middle of the room was Tobin Bell, not a dummy, for the entire shoot. He would have to put an hour's worth of makeup on every day to just lie there, still as he possibly can, in fake blood that would constantly dry out and they would have to constantly top up. And again, yes, the rumours are true. Kerry did in fact cut his own leg slightly as he rubbed faster and faster with the blunt side of the saw blade, resulting in a small mark that he shows off with pride to this day. In the end, as you already know, Saw turned into a massive hit. It was shown at the 2004 Sundance Film Festival first, where it aired at midnight 3 days in a row and gained an incredibly positive reaction from those early adopters. And whilst promoting it, the production team received a letter from a fan claiming to be the guy who sent those jigsaw pieces to that serial tickler we mentioned earlier on. That letter congratulated them on a job well done, and he especially liked the actor Tobin Bell, who played Jigsaw, although in real life he claims that his hair was much, much darker. Saw was and still is one of the most iconic horror franchises of all time. It's got the jump scares, it's got the iconic horror icons, sure, but underneath it has a real story, a serial killing maniac that isn't just killing people because it's fun or he's a demon or whatever. It leaves you thinking, and again it has that twist that was so perfectly executed that ever since day one it's left 99% of its viewers gasping at the sheer gall that anyone would be ballsy enough to do that in a film. For almost a decade, Saw became the new Halloween movie event, a $1 million budget flick that pulled in more than $100 million at the box office and has had more sequels of varying quality ever since. And upon reflection, after watching that original 10 films once again for this video, I've got to say that even though there are some average ones in there as it gets a bit later on, they all tend to really hold on to the idea and the theme of that original flick. For me at least. Yes, they got gorier, and unfortunately the term torture is thrown around constantly when looking back at this franchise because of that, but that's what made the original film so special. It actually wasn't as gory as you probably remember. Some of the best horror movies are the ones that force your third eye to fill in the blanks, which is good as very few of the actual climactic killings are shown here, but that's what makes it work more than the majority of its sequels. Plus, am I alone in thinking that the first movie is the most believable? All the traps that Jigsaw lay out in that original film seem somewhat achievable for a dying man that's so ill he can hardly walk, compared to the overly extreme and complicated contraptions that make their way into the sequels, where you have entire buildings or warehouses filled with traps. Don't get me wrong, they're still good, but they are a lot more like watching a horror movie version of Home Alone at points. Whereas that original, sure, the acting isn't great, it's shot like a naughty Slipknot music video for the most part, and even though that may be laughable to some, for the fans, it's what makes the original so iconically Saw, and one of the biggest movie franchises, not just in horror, but of all genres to date. But you knew that. Saw is very, very popular. But what's not so popular are the video games. Hey there guys, just going to stop the video here briefly and say thank you for watching. If you're this far into this, you're probably into Saw just as much as me. I absolutely love this franchise, and even though I know this video isn't going to do well, I still wanted to make it for people like you. It takes an incredibly long time to do the research for these videos, so if you want to help spread its wings, which YouTube definitely isn't going to do on a video like this, then please do leave a comment, hit that subscribe button and hit the like button. If you know anybody that also likes the Saw movies, please share it with them. Doing this really does help a video like this spread its wings. Anyway, enough from me. Let's now look into the Saw video games. Back in 2009, before the release of the 6th movie, Saw, better known as Saw the video game, was released, and like me, you probably remember hearing that it was average at best. Well, time to change that, because I'm here to tell you that Saw the video game is actually good. Yes, Saw the video game is a good game as long as you go in with the right expectations. Sure, it was released the same year as Infamous, Uncharted 2, Arkham Asylum, Assassin's Creed 2 and Ghostbusters the video game, which are all obviously better, but still, if you want more Saw, then boy oh boy do you get it with this game. And best of all, it follows the events of the first movie, where you play as Danny Glover's character Detective Tapp, trying to escape the bear trap. And for the rest of the film, you'll be trying to escape this, what can only be described as a Saw asylum, to get to the end. Along the way, you'll notice the theming is spot on, the graphics are really good. In fact, when I live streamed this, people thought I was playing some sort of remaster that they didn't know had come out. Tobin Bell had come back to lend his iconic voice, and both James and Lee supposedly helped with the scripting and design of certain traps. Honestly, if you are a fan of Saw, I really cannot suggest this game enough. Again, go in with the right expectations, and what you are left with is a game that plays out better and will be more memorable than some of the movie sequels. It really does shock me that this game was so badly scored upon release. I had a really good time playing through it. I was worrying at first how the developers could pull off such a simple concept, but they did it, and they did it for the most part quite well. The only real negative I have towards the game is that it gets quite repetitive about halfway through towards the end. That, and it's a little bit unrealistic. Yeah, I know that's potentially a stupid thing to say, but it's true. Almost everyone you interact with are horrible in this game. You save them and they treat you like dirt. For me, this takes away from the realism of the earlier Saw storylines, where you're forced to think, what would I do in this situation? If it were me, I would be begging people to help me out and working together. Sure, not everyone would be like that, but the vast majority would, right? Nope. In this game, everyone, and I do mean everyone, wants to kill you, or at the very least, flip you off for saving their life, all because you're a cop. Because of this, not only do you need to deal with the very basic and honestly crappy combat system, but more importantly, it makes it feel more like a game than just a movie. Still, criticisms aside, I do suggest you go and check it out. If you're a fan at least, it's well worth it. A lot of time and effort went into this title, and if it had just 6 more months in the oven, I think we could be looking at the start of a new game franchise that would fit quite nicely along other classics in the genre. Plus, the multiple endings are worth it alone, if you want to see how it all ends for Detective Tapp. Konami was onto something here, wanting to turn this IP into a long-running franchise. Sadly for them, after the reviews came in at average at best, the sequel was rushed along at an even quicker rate than the original. Remember, these games are licensed video games and therefore are partly made to promote the future entries in the movie franchise. And Saw 2 Flesh and Blood was the final nail in the forehead. Guys, this game is really quite naff. The story is far more far-fetched and PS1 era gamey for its own good. The combat system has even been replaced with quick-time events, and even though it starts off strong with a recreation of the opening trap from Saw 2, the Death Mask, which, although was unsuccessful in the movie, lets the player play out that role in this game to its gory ending, sadly, it's all the traps and puzzles that appear for the rest of the game that really let it down. Sure, they got repetitive in the first game, and that was probably one of the original's biggest downfalls, but here, the victims you try and save haven't got a chance, as there is virtually no explanation as to what you do to solve each trap, quickly changing it from repetitive to annoyingly painful to play. Plus, a lot of the original good ideas that just needed refining are missing here. The development team decided to remove a lot of those aspects instead of fixing them this time around. And although quick-time events may have worked in games like Shenmue, for instance, that's due to their few and far between nature, the reason they don't work here is because everything is a quick-time event. I cannot stress how boring the whole game becomes when exploring these dark and dingy hallways, and escaping some of the deadliest traps known to horror fans the world over can be deactivated thanks to a quick button tap of a 360 controller. It never catches you out because it's happening all the time. You know it's coming. Thankfully, the story, or at least the ending, does make it worth your while and has a twist that is on par with some of the series' best. Still, this doesn't take away from the fact that Saw 2 was a rushed sequel. And although time has proven that the movies can get away with quick turnarounds, the game sadly cannot. So many aspects ended up getting cut from both titles, including online play and a co-op mode. But most notable of all is the inclusion of Dr. Gordon from the first game. Dr. Gordon was a character that the team really wanted to implement, and his character and audio files can be found in the game's files. However, Lionsgate shot this down early on as they wanted to continue using this character in the world of the movies. I suppose the only plus to all of this is that the games are part of the movie franchise. In other words, they're all part of the same storyline. If Saw 2 was just the first game again, but with slightly refined controls, combat and variations of the puzzles, I think we would have a really solid game here. Sadly, what we are left with is a title that even the biggest Saw fan would struggle to enjoy outside of its sometimes questionable storyline. And really, that's it. Besides a collaboration with puzzles and survival that honestly I couldn't find anything related to Saw other than the main trailer. Seriously, the gameplay's nothing like this whatsoever. The best thing to come from this is a different trailer that shows no gameplay but gives a hint as to what a decent Saw game could look like. The same could be said for Call of Duty Mobile's Saw DLC. Both of these are easily the furthest removed from the movies of Saw. You also got the Saw DLC for Dead by Daylight, and just like the Evil Dead game, which I have previously talked about, is a decent extension of the Dead by Daylight standard game, as you get to play as Amanda in her pig getup chasing down the victims, or you get to play as those victims, including Detective Tapp, with the bear trap intact and all. As expected, it's only really worth it if you are a Dead by Daylight fan. However, if you are, the DLC does a good job of recreating the world of Saw. And the only other thing I could find based on Saw video games was a fan game called Truth that uses the same Saw game engine, a flash game called Tapped, where you have to choose the correct items to help two trapped victims to freedom. It literally takes about 1 minute to complete, and was created to help promote the fourth movie. All you have left is a mini VR experience used to promote the Jigsaw movie, which involves you trying to survive one of his traps in VR. Even though it's short and far more completable than any of Jigsaw's real traps, it's actually quite well made. Starting off, you need to move the chair you're strapped in towards the end of the room, dodging saws and needles and what have you. You then need to solve a rather simple puzzle box with a more than gory result. And finally, you need to saw off the bear trap that's attached to your own face. And the demo is over. I don't really know what else they could do with this, besides mixing both that VR game with the original Saw game. If the right studio was involved, something special could come from this. But besides that, within the world of Saw video games, that's it. Nothing. Well, nothing besides the odd live escape room-like experience, which I am not ashamed to say I am way too afraid to go and experience myself. A Saw-themed roller coaster at Fort Park here in the UK, which I'm proud to say I have ridden on, and a board game, which I got sent from Iconic Studios, a studio that I have supported in the past with their rather awesome They Live board game that they kickstarted several years prior. I reached out to them, they sent me this prototype that the wife and I have played and enjoyed. It's actually really quite a clever concept that captures the feel of the Saw universe quite nicely. Sadly, we got to send this one back, but once the Kickstarter is over and the company sends them out, you can be damn sure that I'll be back to buy my own copy. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it.
Game over.
I think it's fair to say that Saw isn't going anywhere, and as of the creation of this video, Saw X, the latest entry, has received almost universal praise from fans and critics, with some even going as far as to say that it's the best entry since the original. I personally don't agree, but it is still a good watch. It's a series that continues to entertain in the most grueling ways, looked at by many as nothing more than sick, perverted torture. And yeah, sure, I do kinda see the angle critics are going for with this. However, let's not take away from the fact that behind all of the blood and gore is a super appealing storyline that has kept fans sucked in for 2 decades. But as for the games, if you ask me, we are yet to see the best that this series could offer. The first, I stand by the fact that it's a solid Saw experience, and everything else is nothing more than weird marketing that is no different than the Blood Drive campaign, where horror fans would get free tickets to see the movie if they gave enough blood, and the often forgotten Scream Queens VH1 show that lasted for 2 seasons, where several actresses would compete against each other in a Who's the Best Actor reality TV show, with the winner getting a spot in the next movie. It's a crazy Saw world. Let's just hope that the games continue on where the first left off. Saw: The History and the Games is a video that's been available to Patreons and YouTube members for quite some time. If you want to get to see next week's video early, like right now, then do please sign up and become a Patreon or a YouTube member. In that video we look at the history of Pong, the Atari 2600, Asteroids and Centipede, and within the next few days supporters of the show will also get access to Friday the 13th video games. A really interesting look back at that franchise and its games, including all of the controversy around its Kickstarter. And of course, every single supporter of the show gets access to Slope's Password Zone, which has every single video I've ever released in its unsponsored and uncensored glory. If you want to support, the links are down in the description, just like all of these people's names that you're seeing right down here, with an extra big shout out going to Akatimo84, Andrew Dalton, Arista, Benjamin Guy, Boots and Pup, Bram Perez, Casey Samples, Chevmatic, Clan Bob, Conrad Constantine, to Action Saxon, Dina81, Derek Kuda, Ian Quell, Jay's Manchild, Jabba Al Aiden, James, Jeff Mianowski, John Rogers, Matt Jackson, Mike Fallon, Mind of the Unsane, Nicholas Bertner, Paul Float, Roll VP, Retro to Next Gen aka Lou, Richard Alderjic, Ryan Burford, Sir Nilsson, Shadow Dragon, Stephen, Temjin44, The Sneaky Ferret, Vitus Varnus, VPS Data, Vikeko, Wobbles and Bean the Wonder Ducks, and Ye Old Hamburger. Thank you guys for so much for your support, and until next time guys, it's DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.